welcome to Roots and Relevance. We are on week 4 of our series, Stories of Revolution, where we are going through the parables of Jesus, and specifically the parables of Jesus that are talking about kingdom values that are revolutionary, that are countercultural. And today we're going to be getting into 2 parables that are very similar, the parable of the Great Supper and the parable of the Wedding Banquet in Matthew chapter 22. And not sure if you guys know, but our politics over the last 10 years have been a little bit divisive. They've been changing a little bit.
I haven't noticed.
Have you not noticed? And one of the articles I sent you this week talked about how we've entered a new era of what they're calling transactional politics. And I'm curious, first of all, if you agree with this, but I'll give you an example of what transactional politics looks like. So the idea, maybe the most obvious one would be with the war in Ukraine, right? So when Trump took office, one of the first things he did was his idea on how to stop the war in Ukraine was to try to broker a deal, right? He tried to get Ukraine to sign a mineral rights deal in order to leverage them to come to the table to sign a peace deal. The goal of this is not to talk about whether that's good or bad, but that is sort of transactional politics. And if you'll notice, his sort of the way he deals with anybody in the world now, the way that he deals with anybody in the country is more about transactions than ideology and values. And we've watched a lot of people in our country, a lot of people, even in the church, especially the white evangelical church and the Catholic church, that have moved away from ideology toward this sort of transactional mindset. And I guess my question is that a good thing?
For politics or for what? For church?
For church.
Well, I don't know for church, but I mean, I think the reality is no matter, like in my business or gosh, in any business, even in the educational business outside of public school or even in public school, whether that's university level, whether that's secondary education, there is always, I've got 4 of you to go to. Why would I come to you? And it's not you provide the best service. Sometimes you can even provide the best service. But if there's not some type of quid pro quo kickback, that you got to give me something else. What is that? If it's a discount or if it's you make my kid this or whatever it is, you give better grants out so I can go to school more free than others, then you're not going to be able to obtain all the business that you want. So there is always this transactional, and it's not always you're needing a service or you're needing a widget to buy, and I'm going to provide that at a reasonable price and smile when I sell it to you. It is, I have to do something more than that for you now.
So is your answer, that's just the way it works?
Well, I'm saying in the business world, it is the way it works.
Right.
Like I said, and even in the educational world, I'm teaching both in secondary education private, and I'm teaching in public university level. And you can see it. It's like everything is advertising and marketing now to bring as many people in, because ultimately it's a bottom line thing.
You know, as a marketer, I was really influenced by the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Oh yeah. Good book.
Why?
It really is about the
golden
communication of your values, and do my values align with your values? And people will attach themselves to a business more based on values than the pure transaction.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do.
Why you do it.
You used Apple as like the great example.
And
of
it is
that.
a brilliant example.
And why is that? Do you remember?
Well, because it's like Apple is not the best performing computer. It's not the best price.
How dare you?
It doesn't even make sense when you try to look at those little icons at the bottom. It's like they zip in, zip out.
Sometimes, but really what it is that the people who buy Apple, I'm one of them.
Me too.
We're identifying with a certain value system.
It says something about you when you have that Apple icon on your machine.
That's more branding than
I'll
anything
buy
else.
anything with an
Uh,
apple that's shiny.
That's iconish and branding. That's less performance and even service. You may
it's-
be buying into something, but are you buying
Well,
into a
they're-
brand, or are you buying into?
They're
Well,
buying into
all
their
of
vision.
Yeah.
in my business endeavors, I actually help businesses um, grow their businesses. And one of the things that I would help create is called a video business card. And what we were doing in that is in a 3-minute video presenting why this was important to that business person, why I do what I do, and what do I do so differently than everybody else. That's what we presented in 3 minutes. And so it gave people this ability to connect at a different level, not just transactionally. Ultimately, it was to create the transaction, but the transaction was really rooted in value and not just on a pure I'm going to get the best price transactional basis. People will pay more. Apple is perfect proof of this. People will pay more based on how they identify with you and your values than not.
So is your point that you don't actually have to choose that, like, if you are basing something off of your values, then that is going to get you the best transaction?
I think it leverages you to have a better basis for transaction. If that you can ask for a premium in the transaction, it gives more value to the transaction.
Wally, why is he wrong?
I would say people are willing to sacrifice what they value versus what they might get out. I mean, what they might be able to get from it. So
Unpack that. What do you mean?
that's a very good question. That
They'd give up finding the ideal so they could get a better deal.
no,
Oh.
I think it's the opposite. That I will buy Apple, or y'all will buy Apple. I'm an equal opportunity buyer when it comes to my computers. But people say when I buy Apple, I'm not just buying the product. I'm buying the vision and the hope of the company that it represents. And I'm willing to sacrifice. If it means I pay more, I can get a better machine for a lot more money from a different company. But I will sacrifice for what I value more important. That my value to be a part of this company is more important than me getting a better deal somewhere else.
I cannot wait to see how you're going to segue this conversation into the parable. But
Oh yeah.
to go to what
It's
Daniel,
coming.
and I am not a marketing person at all. I did not take one business class in college, or I guess I had to in high school. But to go to what Daniel says, though, Daniel, would you agree, though? And I read a bunch of Starbucks books, not Apple books. So I was big into Starbucks of why they were successful. And they wrote, I forgot the gentleman co-founder's name that got in and got back out, got out and got back in again. But would you say that maybe if the larger the market, the more the ideal and branding and visions is important, and maybe less on maybe a local level? I'm not saying we don't have ideals locally, but do you think marketing and branding locally is different than it is, say, globally?
I think good marketing scales. So I would say no. I'll say it this way. I got my home and auto insurance bundled with the company. I am working right now to transfer it to a local
Because they're offering better
agency.
premiums.
No, actually, probably
Because you
going
have
to
a person that you like.
there's a
Say
person that I
15%
know
or less.
and like, right?
Well,
So
no,
I
this
will
is my point.
probably pay a little more
Because you're
having
what you're
this
saying
person.
locally is different than globally, then.
Well,
Because you'd much rather have and support someone that you know and like, or you want to engage with, and you're willing to maybe even drop a service and pay more premium for something that you know, one, you have a problem, you can call them. But you're willing to give up maybe the global view of that branding over the personal relationship with someone that's providing a similar service.
well, I'm adding the value of my relationship with this man.
You phrase it any
to
way
it.
you want to, but I agree with you. Then this is my point here. I had a conversation with Timmy. I have a very good friend that politically, socially, he looks globally differently
Right.
than he does one-on-one. In other words, he may look at heterosexuals and immigrants different globally on Fox than he would at a restaurant or friends or a coffee shop, because he's going to view them as a people and not as a problem,
Right.
not as a social stigma, not as a against evangelical, fundamentalism. Did I use that right? I don't know what fundamentalism. Anyway, so you follow what I'm trying to say?
I think so. I'm picking up. I
For
think
my
what you're saying.
business, for what I do, my business is very engaged with the person,
Right.
as long as the service is there. It's a very personal engagement, just like you said with your insurance person. That the more I'm engaged, and genuinely, I think I would say I don't disingenuinely engage. If I don't like you, I usually don't engage. But that's biblical, by the way. But I find that people want that. I was just talking to another gentleman this morning about a business. If there's something that's equal or close to equal as far as quality, would they rather go somewhere like in Cheers, where everybody knows your name? Or do they just want to go and look for the better product for the better price? There are the people that will look at the prices every day
Right.
and go to the cheaper price. But I think most people will go to a place where they feel comfortable, where they feel engaged, where they feel valued.
Well, I think we're really talking the same thing in different language, in that the value of that relationship with that person that you're talking about is really rooted in understanding the underlying why of what that man or woman is doing, and what they bring that's different to the marketplace, that distinguishes them from that guy who gives you about the same service for the same price.
Sometimes it's just a smile and they know my name. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I will go to a restaurant or to a bar. Did I say that loud? Go to a bar or a restaurant just because I know the people and I'm engaged with them. I know what's going on in their lives.
Yes.
I was Indiana last week, or what's going on with your kid, as opposed to maybe going to a better place with better drinks that are cheaper.
But I'll say this: if you treat people differently in, say, your interaction with people in business, that you treat a certain group better than you treat another group, then it gets out that you're disingenuous, right? That he gives them extra attention that he doesn't give me, because you value your business based upon your personal relationships that you have and personal interaction. But if it's seen that you treat somebody differently than somebody else, then that value system that you've put on relationship is all of a sudden thrown into question.
Which is makes my world very difficult, because if you know me, I'm very genuine, and when I like you, and when you call, I'll answer.
Is that why you don't call?
That's what I never answer your phone call. And so it does put a big, huge onus on someone that's how they build business. That's how they do transactions. And when I do a transaction, I will tell you, I'm not thinking about the money. I do on the backside, because I got to pay bills and I got employees. But I'm thinking about, first of all, what do they need? How do I service this? They have a need. How do I fix this? That's the first thing that I'm thinking about. But it is very transactional in a way.
Okay, this is good, and I promise.
There's no segue to this.
No,
deal.
there is. There
Yeah.
is.
You're gonna spell.
That bridge.
You're gonna spell.
I
spell.
Here's before we go there, lawyer. Define for us what is a quid pro quo?
Okay, it's this for that.
Yep.
That's what it means. This for that.
Yep.
So
So-
you give me something, then I'll give
Then-
you something.
Yes, and
That's purely transactional.
exactly. I do this, I get this back in return, and there's also I remember Russell Moore, who most of us are familiar with.
Awesome.
Yes. He actually, one of the things he said was he was perplexed because he was preaching the Sermon on the Mount at a lot of churches, which is very much the values of the kingdom. And he said he would multiple times now, he's had people come up and say, that's great. That worked back in the day, but that doesn't work anymore. And so it's this idea of like, those values no longer work. It doesn't return. And this whole idea of quid pro quo, this transactional piece, so cards on the table, I think it's made its way into faith communities as well. As far as like works righteousness, I'm gonna do certain things, and now I have an expectation that it's going to return. And the parable today, the setup for it was all about quid pro quo, and I'll explain why that is in a second. But let's go first of all to the actual parable. We're going to start with the Luke version in Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 23.
When one of those who reclined at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, "Blessed is the one who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then he told him, Jesus speaking, a man was giving a large banquet and invited many. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who were invited, "Come, because everything is now ready." But without exception, they all began to make excuses. The first one said to him, "I have bought a field, and I must go out and see it. I ask you to excuse me." Another said, "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to try them out. I ask you to excuse me." And another said, "I just got married, and therefore I am unable to come." So the servant came back and reported these things to his master. Then in anger, the master of the house told his servant, "Go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the city, and bring in here the poor, the maimed, the blind, and the lame." "Master," the servant said, "what you ordered has been done, and there's still room." Then the master told the servant, "Go out into the highways and hedges, and make them come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, not one of those people who were invited will enjoy my banquet."
Okay, there's a lot going on here. Right before this, he says, when you give a lunch or dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors, because they might invite you back and you would be repaid. Right? On the contrary, when you're a host a banquet, invite those who are poor, maimed, lame, or blind. And so the setup in this culture, much more in our culture, if you invited someone to your house over for a dinner, and remember, in this culture, a dinner was a much bigger deal than in our culture. There would have been, they probably would have hired musicians. And so like you would have heard, if you're in the village, you would have heard a dinner. You would have heard the dinner party. You would have heard drums. You would have heard music. It was a really, really big deal. It was a thing of status. And so if Daniel invited me over to his house for a big dinner, then the expectation is that at some point in the next 6 months, I would invite Daniel back and return the favor, quid pro quo, right? And so that's kind of that precedes this parable of the large banquet, and Jesus kind of speaks to that with this parable. And you see all these excuses of why these people can't come to the parable
To
party, which, for me, it brings up what's the lamest excuse that
Dun-dun-dun.
that you guys have ever come up with to miss something? What's the lamest excuse that you've ever come up with to get out of something that you didn't want to
I
go
have
to?
so many, I don't really know.
Jonathan, I feel like you're the king.
I don't use excuses. I simply say I'm not going to be able to.
Oh,
do it.
aren't you so ideological?
Oh, and just like,
No, because there are times as an introvert, I don't have any more spoons.
Like that.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
have the
fair.
energy.
It's fair. Yeah,
And it's like my good
I will
friends.
not be attending that.
Yeah, my good friends understand that.
Yeah.
And other people, they don't need my explanation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's part of the point. My understanding of this parable is that these excuses would have been looked at as like really, really lame. Like,
Well,
like
Quit
you
using
might as well
lame.
say
He invited the lame. Quit
the
using
rake
it.
is in the yard. It doesn't matter what the excuse is. Anything will do. So you can say the rake is in the yard.
right. Yeah.
That works.
What's the point of the banquet here?
What is the banquet?
What is the banquet, and why do we care why are we having a banquet in the first place?
What's that? I mean, we're not given an explanation like we had in these first two parables, right? So we're led to what would the original hearer of this parable understand this great banquet to be?
Well, a banquet, right, would have been a lot of food, a lot of drink that's not water, right? A lot of wine.
But
New wine, though.
But-
Non-alcoholic.
Well, there's a celebration aspect to it, isn't there?
well,
absolutely, it's joy. Yeah.
But he says, I mean, it's understood as the great banquet or whatever the parable is, and that's looking toward this great eschatological banquet that's going to happen at the end time.
The kingdom of God.
That's a $19 word.
big
right there.
words.
Eschatological.
But let's not go to the spiritual side of this quite yet. What does it mean on its surface? There were banquets. He's using this real life experience of someone having a party. We would call parties, we wouldn't call banquets. Banquets are definitely more stiff and formal, but they're having a house party with food and music and laughing and cackling and singing, dancing, maybe even only to the Lord. And so what was the point of it?
Aren't we gathering with friends, the people that we care about, the people we love?
But this is what he did initially, we assume. We don't know. Maybe it was
Right.
business people. But he's inviting complete strangers into his house. On the
as a-
second route.
as on the second route. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
The
the
first
invitation's
deal-
going everywhere.
Right, because the way you do a banquet is
Oh,
don't
tell
ha-
me, party planner.
in the Eastern Orthodox, you don't have like, okay, you don't have save the date or, be here. That you just say, here's a general invitation that goes out to the people that you want to come, the people that you want sitting around your table, the people that you want to identify with,
Mm.
right? This is what the Eastern culture is. I'm wanting you to come to my banquet because I want to be identified with you.
Shared values.
Yes, right. So it's not just, hey, we like each other, let's get to know each other. No, I want the world to know that I want to be identified with you and you want to be identified with me. And so this general invitation comes out. And so when the banquet's ready, the expectation is you've accepted it already, that you're to come regardless of what you're doing or whatever. And all of a sudden the invitation that's been given out, the banquet's ready, y'all come. And all of a sudden you have all these people that are invited that said yes, start giving these ridiculous excuses why. And if you look at the excuses, they mirror the excuses for not going to warfare in Deuteronomy chapter 20.
Oh, good point.
What?
Tell us
What do
more,
you
Wally.
Wow.
Listen,
Is this what Russell Moore said?
No, this is Deuteronomy 20 about if when war is happening and you're supposed to be at war. Here's some excuses why. Verse 5. Then the officer shall speak to the people, saying, "Is there any man who has just built a new house and not dedicated it? Let him go back to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man dedicate it. And if there's another man who has planted a vineyard and has not enjoyed its fruit, let him go back to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man enjoys its fruit. And if there's any man who has betrothed a wife and has not taken her, let her go back to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man take her." So when Jesus is telling this parable, and all of a sudden these excuses come in by these people that have already been invited, the hearer's going to go here. Oh,
And what's
Right.
the hyperlink? What's it supposed to trigger?
well, that you're seeing that, hey, here's some excuses not to go to war. Maybe they're legitimate for me not to be a part of identifying with this person that's invited me to his banquet.
Mm,
Wow,
that's interesting.
that is interesting.
So having so one of my hobbies is what my really only hobby is I love to cook. I just love to cook. And if you go to do me the grocery store, I'm always like doubling up. I think COVID had something to do with that. Rachel will literally, I'll go to the grocery and she'll get mad if I bring too many things home. I'm like, you just never know when they're going to run out. And so sometimes when I go get a piece, say, of meat that I'm going to smoke, I always buy like twice or three times too much. And so I remember a couple times, and it's okay, I'm not still offended, but I bought way too much. Maybe we got a pork butt or 2 or 3 or 4 chickens, and I smoked them and invited all the people in the neighborhood. And it's just, and I'm not doing it because I want something. It's just doing it because I have extra food. I have extra, can I say the church word, blessings? Because I just, we have music playing outside, or the pool's open, and here's extra food. You don't even have to stay. Just come get something and go. And
Right.
and then no one shows up because no one likes me. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to invite other people that might enjoy that extra thing that I have to give.
Right.
If I have a chicken and I want to give the leg quarters away, but pull for the chicken breast, who would want to enjoy what I have to provide?
Because you want people that are going to enjoy it.
To enjoy it, not
Right.
because of their
Not
some
out of
transaction
compulsion.
or
Yep,
transaction.
exactly.
But there is an element, and you touched on it just now, is their rejection is it a rejection of the food, or is it a rejection of me? Is it a rejection of how they view me, and is my invitation and the relationship we have valued enough that they're willing to set down what they're doing right now and come and partake? Because that I have experienced both sides of that. And it's hard when I extend an invitation. Hey, I've got this huge brisket. Come. And it's like, and the excuse is so lame.
You're not
It's-
thinking about your brisket. You're thinking about you.
But here's the thing,
Right.
that's sort of last minute though, right? You've got this extra food, and that
Actually, it was a week ahead. But whatever.
okay, so you made this invitation a week ahead.
No, I don't know when I made it. My point being, though, yeah, I got what you're saying. People's lives are full and they don't have time to break what they're doing.
Well, no, but the problem is they've already said yes the first time. Right? They said, hey, whenever you throwing that party? You got
They
the
said
food?
yes.
They said yes, and I'm going to be there. And all of a sudden, the time comes for you to partake of everything that all the labors that you put in, all the effort you put in to provide this meal for them, all of a sudden they start saying, not important enough, and making these lame excuses. I mean,
That's when it's a problem.
that's what,
Yep.
and it's not just he's hurt, or the master of this house is not hurt.
He's angry.
He's
He,
angry.
He's
he did
angry.
get pissed. He
He's
did get pissed.
angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not, oh man, you hurt my feelings.
But why is he angry?
Because he has something to share with someone that he wanted to share it with, and they didn't find what he was giving them valuable.
Or
It's like when
That's
you're
how I
watching
would read it.
it's like when you're watching a show that you really, really love that you've already seen, and somebody's with you and they're just like falling asleep, and you're like, no, you've got to watch this because like you love it and you want to share it with someone, right?
Yeah.
But to the point of the parable, though, here's my question: is the point that Jesus is trying to show these are the type people that will accept my invitation, or is the point something different? Is he showing like, hey, the folks that are going to enter the kingdom of God, the folks that are going to show up to the table are not the people that you think, or is it a different point to this parable?
yes. Well, you love
I
it.
think it's because he has something that means something to him, the banquet food, the place, the party, the environment, and he wants those that will appreciate and desire that to come, no matter what social status they are, whether they're rich or whether they're lame. I think that he's saying, I want people to enjoy what I have to provide. And if you can love that and desire that, then that's who I want to come to the banquet.
So would you say everyone is invited to the table without qualification?
If you're putting me on the spot, I don't know. You scared me by that question. I sound like I was.
Good, because it's a total setup.
It is a setup.
Well,
and
there's an invitation that's gone out, right? There's an invitation that's gone out, and people said yes. They're not coming, and all of a sudden the master says, they're never getting another shot at it. They're not coming back in. In fact, I want you to go out into the street,
Highways,
in the
hedges.
alleys, right? Bring in those from in the town, and if we haven't filled up those people that are within the town, then you go outside the town, beyond our people, and bring in other people that are not like us.
Yep.
And I want that place to be filled, because those people that had the opportunity to be a part, they said they wanted to be a part, they were valuing what I valued. All of a sudden they said, it's not that important to me anymore.
Isn't in the parable, don't those people represent the Jewish people?
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
That's pretty straight up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's pretty.
The first invitation, it would be.
From my NWA days, I'd say that's straight out of Compton.
Easy, baby.
I like that's a hyperlink to our
From-
last
from our
podcast.
last
Yeah,
podcast, yeah,
that's
NWA.
good. That's
Right.
good.
So
So
I crashed that cassette.
you're
Sorry.
exactly right. This is who you've had, these people that said, yes, God, yes, we want to be your people. And all of a sudden, this is what my kingdom's going to look like. This is what my table looks like. And they said, nah, we don't like that.
But he's just followed up on a humility conversation. Timmy made a little reference to it, but he's just come up with a humility conversation with the disciples. And I think that's why he's bringing out the lame and the blind, because there is no quid pro quo there. But I don't know that that's all he's inviting. Maybe it's a spiritual allegory to those that don't feel like they have anything to provide to Yahweh, God, than it is to just come and enjoy what you can because you're humble and you are coming to the banquet with humility.
Either that, or he's inviting the dregs, which means that I'm a dreg.
Me too.
I mean,
I'm a drink
Thank
with-
God.
it
I'm a
does bring
drink
up
with-
all these other interesting parallels, right? Like how difficult it is for the rich to enter into the kingdom of God, and even what we see today. Like where's Christianity exploding right now? It's in Africa, it's in India, it's in
Asia.
right. It's not in the rich places of the world, and so it's interesting because if you look at the passage in Matthew, and there's all kinds of debates of, is this the parable in Matthew? Is it like a later iteration of the first parable, or is it just Matthew telling the parable in a different way? I think, Wally, you preach a lot, right? So like, you know how it is,
I don't know if I preach a lot, but I preach.
but you know how like we'll have like an illustration, and we'll tell the illustration one way, like to one group, and we'll tell an illustration a different way. Like sometimes the illustration will grow like over time. Jesus as a rabbi is very savvy. And so I think it totally makes sense to me that he would take an illustration and tweak it to his audience. And I think that's what he's doing here. the parable is very similar. The difference in Matthew is instead of a banquet, it's a wedding feast.
Yeah, which carries a whole other load of weight and understanding of cultural
Correct.
expectation and responsibility when it comes to a feast.
Right. I mean, and then this idea of joy is, I mean, totally embedded in a wedding feast, right? That's what, to me, I think that's one of the first things they would think about is that it's about joy and it's about covenant. I mean, there's like all sorts of things there. But I think the biggest difference in this one, and this is what the commentators really bring out, is the end. And this was my total setup to Jonathan earlier on, is everybody welcome to the table?
You noticed that he left.
Yes, he
Didn't want to answer this question.
he got raptured. Yeah.
That's right.
Was
Those premillennials.
exactly. Everyone, I asked him, like, is everyone welcome to the table without qualification? It's something I say all the time. Everyone is welcome without qualification. And then in this parable, at the end, I'm going to read verses 11 through 14. When the king came in to see the guest, he saw a man there who was not dressed for a wedding. So he said to him, "Friend." By the way, when a person starts out with "friend," it's like in New Jersey. When I lived there, they said, if somebody ever said, "Hey, I don't mean to offend," then look out,
Yeah.
because whatever was coming next,
Yeah.
like, it was going to be bad. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, tie him up hand and foot, and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Do you have a problem with him throwing this guy out?
I mean, it seems harsh.
Why does it seem harsh, right? The people that have been invited don't come. He's feeling all of a sudden these people that weren't expected to be at a feast that day are brought in, right?
Right.
Go into the main roads and invite them to the wedding feast, as many as you can find. And all of a sudden, they're rushing to get there. And my guess is he didn't have time to go back and change clothes or put on a wedding gear. And all of a sudden he shows up like he's been asked.
So you think the ones that were late invited also didn't have wedding clothes? Is that the implication?
It could be. I don't know.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But like to the person that was like invited first,
yes.
they didn't show up with the wedding clothes.
That's
And
right.
it's like, no, you knew better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's think about the connotations of this, right?
Yeah.
Again, the first invites, like what we just said, would have been the Jewish listener,
Mhm.
right? The Israelites. What's Jesus trying to say here?
You have to be dressed in the appropriate dress to be able to participate in this feast.
And I think appropriate is the word. This is not, I'm going to lay my cards out on the table. This is not Zelensky coming into the White House and dressed like Elon Musk and Trump going, "You're not dressed appropriately," right? This is not that.
Yeah, no.
This is about appropriate. Like, in other words, for a wedding feast, that you were to prepare properly to enter into the wedding feast. You knew what you were supposed to do, and this person did not. They just kind of showed up in a way that they didn't need to show up.
They came in casually,
Correct.
not understanding the significance of the situation nor the importance of what they were being a part of.
It was a lack of preparation. Is that fair?
Lack of preparation or care.
Lack of
That
preparation
I
or
can
care.
come I can come however it is that I want to, and they'll be happy with it.
Exactly.
I'm entitled to show up how I want to into this thing versus how the expectation is of the person throwing the party and what it's for, how I should be dressed and how I should be in the appropriate garments.
So does this mean that, like, the line, "Everyone is welcome to the table," isn't true? Or like, what do I take from this? Like, what does it mean that it takes preparation and it takes care to come to the table, to come to the party?
Well, I think if we look at if we understand this parable as the people that are initially invited are the Jewish people, and they said, the way that I get to the table is not the way that you say I get to the table. I can do what I want. I can follow my own plans. I can follow what is tradition and now you're all of a sudden you're changing how I get to be at the table. You mean I've got to come to the table through a different way other than the covenants and the law and everything? I've got to come into the table with the appropriate clothing, and it's not based on what I can do for myself. It's based upon Jesus and
So
what he's.
it kind of cuts across this whole postmodern idea of like, all roads lead to the party.
That's right.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
If we understand that that being dressed appropriately is that we're clothed with those things that make us right before the person throwing the party, is that he determines how we are dressed. We don't get to.
It's so good. There is a quote from a Christianity Today article about this, and I love this. It says, "God is throwing us a banquet whose lavishness we can hardly grasp. He goes to the cross to make joy the fundamental state of the universe. To refuse to see that, to live like there is no party, to fail to see that the basic reality of the universe is such good news that it births delight and thanksgiving. That's the greatest tragedy of life." And that's kind of like showing up to the party and not wearing wedding clothes.
There's a Christmas hymn that we sing, "Away in a Manger," and it sounds like a kid song, and we sing it to our kids every night, during Christmas. But in the last verse, it says, "And fit us for heaven to live with thee there." In other words, I'm not fit. I'm not dressed appropriately in and of who I am. I have to be dressed with the appropriate clothes, and that can only be attained and acquired through a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so we understand that in the New Testament, it talks about being clothed with Christ, being clothed in his righteousness. I think of the hymn "On the Solid Rock," dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. This is what it means to be dressed appropriately in this parable. That the way that we get to be a part of this end time banquet with the God of the universe and his son Jesus Christ is that we've trusted and believed and submitted our lives to him, and we've clothed ourselves with him.
And if we've truly received that grace, then we're going to do that.
That's right.
We're going to show up.
That's right. And we'll value what the master of the house values. We want to be clothed with those things. We want to honor the person that's laid out this feast and given us the opportunity to come at this banquet.
And it won't be a burden because, again, the banquet is not, it's not bad. It's
That's
not
right.
a burden. In fact, it's pure joy.
Absolutely.
I mean, a good wedding. I mean, come on. Like,
don't talk to me about weddings. I'm not a big wedding person.
Are you not?
No,
I mean,
I don't.
I didn't introduce you to New Jersey weddings because, like, I got to be honest, Wally. Like weddings in the Bible Belt, like I was doing those for a while, and then I went to New Jersey, and I was like, oh wait, you can have an open bar and dancing. Like I never knew anything about this.
Because my social, I'm a hermit at heart, and so my sociability is about 30 minutes, and I'm done. And so I'll go to the ceremony, but I just hate the reception. But anyway,
that's funny.
If I go to your reception, I really, really like you.
That's okay. That's good to know. So if you're listening right now and Wally was at your wedding, you might be like, wait a minute.
Did I see him at my reception?
Exactly. Well, I hope this was good for you. It was another great parable, and we're just going to keep going through these. And so, yeah, we'll see you next week. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.